Welcome back to the Mainstream, where today's episode is brought to you by the letter F. That's right, we're talking Farage, we're talking flags, and even foreign entanglements. But first things first, my friend and colleague, Saxon Davidson, welcome to you.
Thank you, Morgan. Good to be back.
Well, it's back by popular demand.
Back to back, 2 weeks in a row.
That's it. It's a very unique
thing
for the Mainstream. That's so let's get into it. And look, frankly, we have to clear some formalities out of the way because it feels like every man and his dog has had something to say about Anthony Albanese's appearance on the Nicky Osborne Bush Deep podcast. And I've actually gone a step further and watched it. Which is probably unusual for most people in this space. Have you had a chance to see it?
I've seen the parts that have gone viral.
Yes.
And I did watch sort of the immediate aspects of the podcast before and after to get a better context of what actually was being discussed. But no, I did not sit through an entire episode of Albo and the comedian.
Yeah, look, it's probably not your style of podcast.
No,
fair, but and I won't recount the specifics because everyone has. But yeah, the two main points of controversy were the comments about Kylie Minogue and the comments about the Prime Minister of Japan. I won't go into details except to say that look, it is pretty cringe to see a prime minister do things, to be on a podcast like this. But as for the content, I think actually it's been largely a beat up.
A little bit.
You know, there's a lot of commentary like, oh, how could he do this? Well, this is a podcast that is known.
Yes.
And they know what is sort of discussed. I think they went into this with their eyes open, and this was a very deliberate.
Yeah. Now, you can have all the conversation in the world, in my opinion, about whether this type of podcast is below the office of the Prime Minister. I mean, I personally think so, but I don't feel that strongly about it to have a week-long character assassination of the Prime Minister. I think the only real consequence that could come of this is if the Prime Minister of Japan was genuinely aggrieved and genuinely took offence, and she may have. But if not, I think we can all move on from what has been the biggest distraction to what has actually been quite a consequential week in Australian politics.
I mean, I want make one more point about the podcast because I thought actually the things that most upset me were he called Canberra a great city. So he had the question about Kylie Minogue, and 2 questions later, Nicky Osborne actually asked him to recite the second verse of the national anthem. And no joke, it took him about 1 minute, and she had to lead him into it.
Oh no!
So I thought that was more stunning from a prime minister. So you've mentioned the distraction from actual problems, and it's been a consequential week, as you say. And so one such issue that's come up this week is China's test missile strike this week.
Yes.
On Monday, a People's Liberation Army submarine fired a missile carrying a dummy warhead towards international waters, hitting its designated target. And this has sent a couple of signals. So as IPA adjunct fellow Peter Jennings noted in The Australian this week, it sends a message to the US that it has achieved a level of nuclear parity with them and can hit any American city with missiles and warheads more modern and capable than those of their US counterparts, which is staggering. Secondly, and perhaps relevant in particular to Australia, is that it has sent a signal, a very negative signal to those in our region in the South Pacific, who have in the past been courted extensively through Chinese soft diplomacy. And this is an indication that
that era is
over, and they're now being pushed away. And I thought it was quite significant that Matthew Whale, the Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands, and if the Solomon Islands have been one of their strongest allies in the region up until recently, he said China is a good friend of the Solomon Islands, but this is not something a friend does. This is not good in our region. Although, as Jennings says, China has zero strategic interest in our opinions, which I think that's the behaviour of a superpower, isn't it? So, I mean, this all seems like a really big deal.
This is a supremely huge deal.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's received the media attention that it's deserved to be quite frank.
Yeah.
For, because of this dumb podcast that the Prime Minister was on. But, I mean, I think this just reinforces the idea that we do need strong soft diplomacy in our region, and we should actually be spending a higher proportion of our total foreign aid in the South Pacific and in Southeast Asia, because that's actually where we are vulnerable. So we should be expanding our influence in our own region rather than sending money to far off corners of the world for whoever knows what. And the other thing that it shows me is that we need to be spending more time and more money on our own national security and our own defense. Now, we all know that the government have fudged the numbers with how much of our GDP they're actually spending on our national security and defense, because they're including things such as veteran pensions as part of that total figure. And veteran pensions are important, but they're not actually funding for our national security and our defense. So it's sort of using that NATO 5% figure, which is inclusive of your defense capabilities as well as your broader veteran affairs and defense infrastructure spending. Now, if that was actually what we were spending, that 5% of that combined, that would be one thing. But we're spending, 3%?
Well,
and it's that combined.
We may potentially get to 3%.
We may potentially get 3%.
Well, I think we're currently at about 2%.
Of that, no, but of that combined figure. No, we may barely be only on 2% when you only include our defense capabilities.
Well, I mean, if we're going to be expected to be a regional power, then we need to do. We can't even really. We don't have the capacity to defend ourselves at this rate.
No,
let alone a region of allies.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
And it's like top to bottom. Throughout the ADF. From recruitment to procurement to administration, everything.
The other thing this has told me as well is that this whole idea that we can normalize our relationship with China, or normalize. I actually think that this relationship with China now is as normal as it's always been. They're a superpower. They will flex its muscles if they need to, and they have. And if we do something that mildly inconveniences them, they will show up with an ICBM and do a test dummy nuke around French Polynesia to scare us and to scare our neighbors in the South Pacific. So I think this is actually our normal relationship with China. But the Prime Minister has made it sound like that normalizing means to think that we can tame a superpower by being friends and selling lobsters. And it's just not the case.
Yes. Yeah, well, we have to be realistic about what we can really achieve. And I think at the end of the day, it's the point you made, which is at the end of the day, we need to do what we can to sustain it and defend ourselves, and to sustain our own sovereignty
and increase our sovereign capability. In terms of being able to survive independently as a nation, and be able to create our own munitions and be able to sustain ourselves, empower ourselves, and have a defense manufacturing base, as well as a manufacturing base and a whole range of other things to support that defense base, such as steel.
That's it. Or as food, 25 years ago, we refined 80% of our fuel supplied domestically, and now it's at about 20%, and we import the rest. We're completely exposed on a range of fronts. So it is an uncertain world. Things, and China is showing that things can get turbulent. And we need to manage that.
Absolutely.
And I just, as we know, governments have just not done enough.
No.
Over a long period of
time. We haven't really recovered from the defense cuts that we're seeing throughout the Gillard era, and we're ruining it today when one of the former deputy prime ministers of that time is now the prime minister. That's it.
So let's take a look at some of the things that the government has been focused on over the past week instead. So on Sunday, the government announced, as part of NAIDOC Week, which is a celebration of Indigenous culture, it was urging flag marshals to fly the three flags. in domestically ended Australian overseas posts as part of NAIDOC Week. And so in a press release, it says, the Australian Aboriginal flag and the Torres Strait Islander flag should be flown on additional flagpoles where available on Australian government buildings and establishments. Other organisations are encouraged to follow this protocol. No one actually supports this. This is such a marginal view, but this is a fixation of this government.
Absolutely.
To diminish the flag by pretending that we have 3 flags.
Yes.
And it's using this event as its piggyback to do that. Also as part of NAIDOC, which I found interesting, Katie Gallagher, who is the Minister for Finance, Minister for Women, Minister for the Public Service, and Minister of Government Services, what a mouthful. What a basket. Published a post on social media saying, including, always was, always will be, which is a statement usually intended to mean that Australia always was Indigenous land, always will be.
Yeah.
In other words, sovereignty was never ceded.
Yes.
Which is extraordinary and radical coming from a Minister of the Crown.
Yeah.
Finally, it was reported this week that as part of a draft policy platform to be approved at the ALP, Australian Labor Party National Conference later this month, Labor will formally commit to developing an anti-racism strategy, formalise its support for Welcome to Country ceremonies, and recommit to the principles of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Wow, that is quite a lot of stuff that mainstream Australians actually have no interest in.
And actually actively and openly oppose.
Yes.
In many cases, and actually in all of those cases. So Australians overwhelmingly reject Welcome to Country in everyday life.
Yep.
Australians overwhelmingly rejected the Voice to Parliament, and in so doing rejected the Uluru Statement of the Heart, because when you reject the first step in a 3-step process,
the other two
become moot. And Australians overwhelmingly support our national flag.
Yes.
And do not support its dilution by including the Torres Strait Islander and the Aboriginal flag.
Yeah, I think it's at the end of the day, it's Australians don't want to be divided. And all of this
is in response to one nation.
Well, we'll get to that because this is these are all tools to divide people.
Yes.
I was really struck by the idea that Labor would formally commit to developing an anti-racism strategy. Now, as innocuous as that sounds, that's actually quite a radical proposition. And it really flows from Ibram Kendi, who is this American
author and the
anti-race academic. And the popular quote is, the only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. And in order to treat some persons equally, we must treat them differently. So this is the idea that
it's very Orwellian, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely it is. So this is the idea of entrenching differences in the law.
Yes.
In order to correct from some claimed or alleged power imbalance in society. So what Labor is going to, looks like, commit to at its conference is committing to, this is like the voice on steroids.
Yeah.
This is across everything.
Yeah.
Throughout government and society. So it's staggering. But you just alluded to why this is being done.
Yes.
Which I just find absolutely staggering.
Yeah,
you need to talk about it.
I actually can't believe that all of this is being done to, in their sort of vision, fight divisiveness via one nation, is to further divide Australians on all of these fronts. When they failed so spectacularly to do it, Australians rejected division a year and a half into Albanese's premiership, and instead they've completely doubled down. And I mean, this comes back to what we were discussing last week with the ACTU, in that even though this is way outside of their scope, what we have found is that they are, when we saw that the ACTU are still committed to the Voice to Parliament, just a week later in their draft platform, it pops up via the Uluru Statement of the Heart. So we can't say that we weren't warned about this. And
We know that this is in their ideological makeup.
It's
these
in their
are things
ideological
they're committed to.
It's in their ideological makeup. And something that we should consider when discussing NAIDOC is that NAIDOC's not just a celebration of Indigenous culture, even though that's what it's commonly known as. NAIDOC is actually a protest against the sovereignty of the Commonwealth of Australia. That's its foundation. And the fact that the federal government has committed itself so fervently, not only by having the 3 flags in all government buildings at home and abroad, but also by including all of these radical policies at the party level and in their platform, means that the Labor Party have actually become quite radical and quite radically anti-Australian sovereignty. They're actually against the sort of notion of nationhood.
Yeah.
And I mean, you see this in other areas as well. They consistently bring about policies that sort of undermine our federational system. They're anti the monarchy, and in a whole wide range of other areas that sort of undermined the essence of the Australian way of life as well.
Yeah.
This is actually something it's quite radical and it's quite ideologically extreme.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame that this is the majority party in in the federal government, but also in the majority of states in the country.
Yeah.
And mainstream Australians have had enough of it.
Yep.
But
that point, let me just jump in there because I just wanted to quote this from a news report in the Australian, where it says a senior Labor source said the inclusion of the anti-racism strategy in the draft platform was a direct response to concern among branch members about the rise of racism as One Nation's support grows. So they're essentially they are adopting these really fringe views in response to their concerns about what is essentially the most popular
political
party in the country,
Yeah.
adopting, what in my view, many mainstream positions on things like the flag,
Yes.
our welcome to country.
Yes.
So, I mean, the
Also-
lack of political judgment in that just stays.
Yeah, voters aren't leaving Labor for One Nation, or the former Labor voters that have left Labor for One Nation aren't leaving Labor because they're not woke enough, or because they didn't fight for the voice enough.
Yeah.
Because, quite frankly, the Labor voters that have left Labor to join One Nation or to be One Nation voters have actually left because the Labor Party have abandoned, fundamentally mainstream Australian principles, and they're doubling down on it.
Yeah.
So, and these are the type of policies that you sort of expect from the Greens or even the Socialists. These are not the views held and continue to be pushed by a mainstream political party. Yeah. And alas, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I think this is a big deal. I think the idea of an anti-racism strategy in the federal government is quite chilling. I think what it signals to me is that they're less concerned now with even trying to win elections on merit.
No.
On the merit of their position.
Yeah.
Essentially, what they want is to control the parameters of public debate.
Yes.
Through things like an anti-racism strategy, so that it's unlawful for candidates like One Nation candidates to even say things like we shouldn't have welcome to country ceremonies.
Yes.
That's that's what it looks like.
And that would be captured via misinformation laws,
Yeah.
duty of care laws on the internet.
There'll be a suite of laws
exactly.
that will accommodate this. So, there's one to watch. Now, essentially what we've been talking about is wokeness.
Yes.
We don't always like to use that word but everyone knows what it means, really. And it's worth mentioning just how much of that is already baked into Australian law already.
Yeah.
And this came up over the past week when former Prime Minister Julia Gillard was questioned about the legacy of her government's 2012 amendments to the Federal Sex Discrimination Act. And at the time, that amendment it did a few things, but in particular, it dissolved the legal definition of man and woman.
Yep.
And added a new protected attribute in law of gender identity.
Sure.
And which has been weaponized recently
Yes.
by a trans person
Yes.
who was excluded from a female-only digital platform. This was Giggle and Tickle.
Yeah.
And Gillard was asked to quote, reflect on some of the unintended consequences of those changes. And she responded that essentially the issue you're referring to were not raised by anyone because they simply weren't a matter of public discourse at the time. It wasn't squarely something before the Parliament. So it was a different time. It wasn't something squarely before the Parliament at the time. So I think we make an error in uplifting what we know now, and public discourse now. Sorry, she has this funny way of speaking, I think. So I think we make an error in uplifting what we know now and public discourse now, and just putting it down 14 years ago. That was a bit confusing, but essentially what she's saying is,
couldn't foresee.
These were not foreseeable consequences. Yeah. This was just totally unreal. But here's the thing. Our own colleague, Kian Hussey, has unearthed that the Attorney General's Department at the time actually considered such a scenario and stated explicitly that the exclusion of a trans woman from a female-only club could constitute gender identity discrimination, and that they were confident that the draft bill, quote, will achieve this intention. So how is it that it just seems extraordinary to me that a former Prime Minister would attempt to essentially rewrite history when all of this stuff is a matter of public record?
I think it's incredibly brazen and very arrogant that, Julia Gillard would play dumb and just like pretend that these are not foreseeable consequences. Yeah. Particularly because the Australian Labor Party have always made laws that are designed to have long-lasting consequences well into the future. Because up until recently, the Labor Party were not the natural party of government. They actually had to embed laws that would ensure that they would have a foot in the door and govern while not necessarily being the literal government. So I'm actually quite amazed that she would pretend as if this, that this was not a foreseeable outcome, that this could never possibly happen, and this is just a modern, this is just a modern consequence of an old law.
Yeah. Well, I think at the time, I think that you're right. Is that the idea of entrenching these changes, empowering the government in this way, was a sort of a shifting of power, permanent power to the left, and that's why they do it. I agree with that.
Yeah.
It is interesting though that she doesn't back in really her changes.
No, she doesn't say. Usually what the left do in instances like this is that they say, "Well, this didn't really happen, but I am glad that it did." So she's sort of backing away. She's sort of saying, I didn't foresee that this would happen, and this is a consequence of that. Full stop.
Yeah,
like that's what she said. She's not saying it's an oddly neutral statement.
Thank you for watching The Mainstream. If you like what we do, make sure you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and head over to the IPA website at ipa.org.au to see our research and analysis and support our work by becoming a member. Now back to the chat. On a completely different topic.
Yes.
Because I cannot figure out how to link this. Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage.
Now, he has recently dominated British news. Now, he has been the target of unseemly accusations about the receipt of a gift in 2024. Yep. Specifically, he received £5 million from Christopher Harbin, a crypto entrepreneur. But this wasn't recorded on the Parliamentary Gifts Register, as in Farage's words, it was a personal gift received before he actually launched his political comeback. Now, he is arguing that he has followed the rules, but he has been called a money grubber, among other things, and Farage has branded the whole thing an establishment hit job. Whatever the case, it has culminated now in Farage resigning his seat in Clacton and sparking a by-election, which Farage will contest. It's been interesting. A lot of some people in Australia have found that quite unusual. What do you make of the fact that he would resign in order to contest a by-election?
I mean, people find that unusual now. Well, it wasn't unusual in the past in Australia under the Westminster system. You used to have ministers resign over very minor infractions. Under the Westminster tradition, I take that him resigning as an admission of wrongdoing or admission of guilt, because typically, because if he hasn't done anything wrong, he would say, "Look, you can investigate me, and if I'm found guilty, I will let the constituents decide whether I am worthy to remain as the member for Clacton." But because he has preemptively resigned under that Westminster tradition, I think it signals an admission.
Yeah,
that's my personal view.
Yeah. No, and we do have a difference of views on this, which I'm not ashamed of. No, I think what you're right about, what you're talking about in the Westminster tradition is usually ministers.
Yes.
Ministers resigning because they have to be responsible for the actions taken, say, in their departments or in their ministries, and they're a minister of the Crown.
Yeah.
So that is I see this slightly different. I don't think this has ever really, or if it has been a part of Australian political culture, not for a long time, but the idea.
Well, I was thinking like 60 plus years ago.
Yeah. The idea of a member of Parliament, a backbencher or a crossbencher, resigning. I do think that is unique to British culture, and one of the reasons it is somewhat unique to British culture is technically and constitutionally a member of the House of Commons is not allowed to resign. So that's how serious it is. Yeah. Whereas here, you give a piece of paper to the speaker, and pretty much that's it.
You do your press conference in the garden, and then you go.
Yeah, that's right. But in the House of Commons, because these are ancient traditions.
Yes.
There are, I can't remember what they're called, but it's like not the Sheriff of Nottingham, but there are these sort of these nominal offices of profit under the Crown. So under the Westminster system, if you take an office of profit under the Crown, you become ineligible to be a member of Parliament.
Sure.
So what you would do is you would be appointed to one of these, Sheriff of Nottingham positions. You wouldn't actually do anything, but you might get £1 a year or something.
Yeah.
Become an offer, receive profit under the Crown and be ineligible for Parliament. That's the process. So they've had to create that in order to facilitate someone like Farage resigning.
Okay.
Now, that's for a Westminster nerd like me. That all sounds interesting. Probably not interesting, but the point is that is why it's quite unique in British politics to resign. So him resigning, it's quite like, this is in my mind a very faithful application of the Westminster principle, because they've got all this debate now. Oh, there's a watchdog that's going to make inquiries into Farage. Oh, there's all this foul play, and essentially Farage is saying, at the end of the day, the only people that can decide whether or not I am in Parliament are the constituents in Clacton.
Yes,
and he's saying, and they will decide it now.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying one way or another whether or not Farage is right about the claims that he's made about the donations or anything like that. Maybe his critics are right, maybe not. But I do criticize some of the characterization about, this is a bombshell, or this is the end of Farage or something.
I don't think it's the end of Farage.
Yeah.
What I will say is that I think resigning this quickly is sort of like a snap judgment almost. I think, I've already said that I think that this resignation is a signal of an admission of guilt. I think it also undermines his argument that the political elites are after him. It actually hurts future cases when the political elites are after people, because especially since all the other majors in the United Kingdom have announced that they're not running anyone.
Yes.
It's going to be him versus Binface.
Yes. Well, that's right. I mean, every other party of note is boycotting the by-election, including, it should be noted, Restore UK.
Yes, which I find extraordinary.
It's a massive mistake.
It's a goal.
If you've been paying attention to British politics, you know that Restore and its leader Rupert Lowe have really been pitching themselves as the alternative, or the real deal, the genuine alternative to Farage and to reform. And this seems like the number one opportunity to sort of put yourself in that fight.
Yeah. You know, I think reform dies if Farage lost his seat. It's the end of reform.
Yeah,
I think, because he is a one-man show in many ways.
Maybe, yeah.
The party does revolve around him.
He's a very charismatic figure. But I think even ahead of the previous election, Reform were rising, and they were polling well before Reform, before Farage took on the leadership. I think without Farage, there will still be a sort of outside populist alternative to the mainstream.
Yes.
It
may not be someone with the
they just may not win.
Yes. It'd be someone without the history, without the charisma, and without the political skill of Nigel Farage. And I don't see a way for the sort of the new populist right to take hold or continue to take hold in the UK if Farage were to lose his seat, which I don't think will happen because all the other majors are not running anyone against him.
Yep.
I think if Restore were to have run and they did beat Farage, then they would be the vehicle then.
Yeah.
Because they would have defeated their main rival on the right. And then all of a sudden, the entire debate becomes restructured about Restore. But I think they've made a humongous blunder.
Yeah. No, it could very well be the end of Restore UK. And if you're a fan of Rupert Lowe, and probably up until now, I've had quite a favourable opinion of him, but I think it's definitely a knock on him to sit it out, along with the rest of the mainstream political establishment.
Well, I don't understand why. So I don't understand why the Tories aren't doing it either. They need to capture.
It's the worst look for all of the parties to make this decision.
So I can understand why the Lib Dems and Labor and the Greens have sat it out.
Yeah.
Because they're like,
they're only going to get 10% anyway.
We'll just let the right battle each other out, like a battle royale.
Yeah.
But no, the Tories have sat out and Restore have sat out. I don't think it's as big a deal for the Tories to sit out, but I still think it's a mistake for them because they actually need to make ground. They can't afford to let any seats go, like just because
picking and choosing your seats.
Exactly.
That's an interesting decision.
Mistake. Yeah.
Well, let's finish on back to onto the domestic front, and I think it's a good news story. Out of Queensland, an annual sustainability analysis is among a series of climate reports the Queensland government has quietly scrapped in a move experts say make it difficult to get a full picture of the state's energy transition. Queensland Treasury's annual sustainability report, released every year between 2020 and 2024, detailed the state's progress on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and expanding renewable energy. But the government did not release a report in 2025 and has yet to release a report this year. Hallelujah.
Yeah. This is the good type of quiet quitting, I think.
Yes. I do like that. Yeah, they're not making a big song and dance about it. It's just like all this irrelevant stuff. We're just not doing it.
Yeah, but this is the continued sort of trend we're seeing of crab walking away from net zero that we're seeing in Australia. It's not quite at the speed that we may personally want, but when things are in such a dire state. I suppose any progress is good progress. So it does say that they've retained their emissions reduction target, which I think is ridiculous and a joke. But I think it does show that the LNP in Queensland are taking the concerns of their regional constituencies quite seriously, considering that's where the base for the LNP largely is. And I think that they need to go further. They need to completely ditch the policy of net zero and remove any emission reduction targets that they have. This will have the effect of not only helping industries in Queensland, but it will undermine Labor's federal net zero target as well. So I think they need to think more big picture rather than quiet quitting and sort of, I suspect, leaking it to the AFI, let everyone know. They need to be more like the CLP that we're seeing Leah Finocchiaro's government in the Northern Territory, which has, I believe, ditched their net zero target. I could be wrong, but they've definitely taken a lot of deregulatory approaches towards energy emissions and their mining sectors and agricultural sectors.
I think you're right. It's a time to be bold. I think most of the world is moving away
absolutely.
From these artificial international targets. We know now that increasing alternatives like wind and solar into the system is really just causing unreliability and price volatility. So it's not helping anyone here, except for the foreign-owned conglomerates who run these facilities,
who run our solar and wind factories.
And so look, good news, but I think there is a lot more to be done. And especially in the context of, do you want to mention COP31?
Oh, yeah, sure. So COP31, so spending, I think it's $650,000 to send Indigenous representatives to COP31. This is on top of the millions upon millions of dollars that we are contributing to have it run in Turkey, of course, and having Chris Bowen be the president of COP31, and be a part-time energy minister in the middle of an energy crisis. I think, first off, why are we sending anyone to COP31 on the taxpayers' dime? If people want to travel to Turkey on your own money, and that includes Chris Bowen. And why?
I mean, there's so many. I can tell you that there are a lot of Australians right now struggling to pay their energy bills.
Yeah, they're choosing between eating and eating. And we're sending people over to speak or to attend a conference, which has actually exacerbated that choice. So
essentially, why you're struggling and why it's a good thing you should.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to talk about that in Turkey. And mainstream Australians and households just have to cop it. I think it's an extraordinary abuse of the taxpayer, money, of faith of the taxpayer, and just a complete
for no positive
joke.
Outcome.
Oh no,
no net benefit at all.
Of course. So these are international goals. And Australians are at the back of the queue. So, look, we find the good news where we can, but
it just uncovers more bad news.
As long as like the federal government, the Australian, this is our government. At the national level is still like full-throated support in this stuff. Despite the evidence, despite the fact that Australians, there is no ambiguity. They want reliable and cheap energy. They don't want emissions reduction targets.
Well, it was like 77% of Australians.
Yes, IPA research found that.
77% of Australians want reliable, more affordable energy, and only 23% want renewables.
Reduction
as
the goal of energy.
As the goal of energy policy,
and it's complete back. And the government has it completely backwards. So very, very frustrating. I tried to end on a positive note, but then I ended up finishing on a negative note.
Grumble.
So, sorry about that, viewers, but thank you for being with us. Thank you, Saxon.
Thank you.
Look forward to maybe we'll get another chance to do this.
Hopefully. So.